I used to laugh at the P-47 Thunderbolt. We all did. In the summer of 1943, at our airfield near Lille in northern France, we believed we ruled the sky. We flew Messerschmitts, sharp, elegant, deadly. Our instructors told us the P-47 was a clumsy American toy. Heavy, slow, a flying milk can. They said it would be an honor to shoot it down. Nothing more. I was 22 years old. My uniform smelled of fresh leather and fuel. I felt invincible. The ground crew polished the wings of my Bf-109 G6 until they shone like the blade of a knife. When I looked in the mirror of my cockpit canopy, I saw the reflection of a hunter. The war had not yet taught me to fear the sky. The first time I saw a thunderbolt, I didn't even bother to engage. It was below us, struggling to climb, trailing behind its formation like a wounded animal. We joked over the radio. "Look, there goes the fat American." Someone laughed. "Careful. If it falls, it could crush Paris." But arrogance weighs more than armor. September 6, 1943. That was the day I understood how quickly laughter dies. We were scrambled to intercept bombers heading toward Amiens. 30 B-17s flying in a perfect defensive box. The sun glared off their silver skin. The sky was loud with engines and determination. Our job was simple. Dive from above, fire, climb away, and repeat. We had done this many times. Yet that day, something was different. When we engaged, the bombers did not seem alone, out of the sun. Like shadows ripping through the clouds, they came. Not one, not four, dozens. Thunderbolts. Their wings stretched wide, like steel predators. And though they dove slowly, they dove with purpose. They did not chase us. They blocked us. Wall after wall of angry American gunfire. I pressed the trigger and felt my 20mm cannons roar. My rounds hit a thunderbolt's wing. Sparks flew, but the beast did not fall. Then the sky opened with Thunder .8 heavy machine guns answered at once. The bullets screamed past my canopy. My plane shook from the pressure wave alone. I heard the radio crackle. It was Weber, my closest friend. "They're too close. I can't shake." Silenced, I never heard his voice again. We were not the hunters anymore. At 600 kilometers per hour, I dove into a cloud, my heart pounding like a drum. The world turned gray. The cold air bit through my gloves. For the first time in the war, I felt small. When I burst out of the cloud cover, the sky was empty. The battle was above me now. My breath fogged the glass. My hands trembled. We returned with 6 missing .6. We had barely fired a proper pass. As I stepped down from the cockpit, my legs refused to hold me. The laughter was gone. The pride was gone. The silence on the airfield hurt more than bullet wounds. We had underestimated a monster. That night, lying in my bunk, I could still hear the roar of those guns inside my skull. I closed my eyes and saw sparks on a silver wing. I saw Weber falling through the clouds, swallowed by the sky he once loved. The P-47 Thunderbolt had arrived, and it wasn't a joke. Not anymore. But that was just the beginning. After that mission, nothing felt the same. Every briefing now mentioned the Thunderbolt. Maps were marked not only with bomber routes but with altitudes where P-47s hunted. Our commanders tried to calm us. They repeated the same line. "The Thunderbolt is strong only in a dive. Catch it in the climb. Hit it while it's slow." But the truth hung heavy over us. It was never slow when it mattered. October 14, 1943. The Americans called it Black Thursday. For us, it was black as well, just in a different way. We were ordered to intercept bombers heading for Schweinfurt, where our ball-bearing factories struggled to stay alive. We scrambled in the early morning cold. Frost coated my canopy until the sun burned it away. The air above Germany felt thin, sharp, like the edge of a blade. When we reached altitude, the sky looked like a battlefield forged from metal. Hundreds of bomber engines drummed like war gods, and guarding them just as before, thunderbolts. This time they didn't wait. They came straight for us, nose first, guns blazing. The sound of 8.50 caliber guns firing together is not like normal gunfire. It is a storm that eats steel. Each tracer was a bright line of death. I rolled hard right. A P-47 streaked past me, trailing smoke from one wing. I thought he'd go down, but he kept flying, still firing at another Bf-109 ahead of me. How could a plane take so much punishment? Our cannons needed a single clean burst to kill. Their guns only needed a moment to bleed you dry. I saw Feldwebel Roth pull up to escape the attack. A thunderbolt climbed after him, impossibly. Everyone had told us the P-47 couldn't climb well. But at high speed, it climbed like a furious god. Roth didn't stand a chance. .1 burst. Flash. A spin. Fire. We fought like cornered wolves. I fired at a bomber, watching pieces of aluminum fly off its fuselage. For a second, I thought maybe we still controlled the air. Then shadows descended again. Everywhere I looked, those wide, powerful wings. Their presence changed the sky itself. If we chased bombers, they chased us. If we tried to dive, they dove faster. There was no escape, no safe angle. When we landed, only 10 of us returned from 22 men left the ground. 10 returned to feel it again beneath their boots. That evening, I sat alone near the hangar, boots muddy, uniform stained with fuel and sweat. My hands smelled of oil and fear. I tried to write a letter home but couldn't hold the pencil steady. I no longer felt like a hunter. The sky was turning against us. We still spoke bravely in front of others. We still saluted. We still lifted off into the freezing wind each morning. But in our hearts, a new truth was growing. There was a wolf in the clouds. A machine built not just to fly, but to kill. And kill us it did, day after day. Soon, it would go beyond the skies over France. It would follow us everywhere, to the borders, to the heart of Germany. Even on the ground, you could hear its anger in the distance, rumbling like a storm preparing to strike. We had laughed at the thunderbolt. Now we feared its shadow, and the worst part of the war had not even begun. But that was only beginning. We kept flying. There was no choice. It was early 1944 when everything changed. The Americans began a new strategy. Fighters would no longer just escort bombers. They would roam ahead of them, hunt freely, attack our airfields before we even saw their bombers. We woke up to sirens and the scream of engines. Not our own. Thunderbolts. Above our own runways. I ran from the barracks, still fastening my flight jacket when explosions tore through the motor pool. Our commander shouted orders, but his voice drowned in thunder. P-47s dived low over the base, firing at anything that moved. Trucks burned. Fuel tanks erupted. Machine gun nests were shredded before they could fire. The earth shook and the sky shook harder. We were supposed to own the morning sky. Instead, we hid from it. By noon, 3 hangars were gone. 4 of our fighters turned to twisted frames. 5 men dead before they ever reached their aircraft. The rest of us stood powerless, watching black wings vanish into the clouds. We had no words, only silence and smoke. The next weeks bled into one long nightmare. We would take off already exhausted and scared, knowing thunderbolts waited somewhere above the clouds, patient and merciless. March 8, 1944. A day carved into my memory like a scar. We received orders to attack a bomber stream near Berlin. As we climbed, the radio crackled with voices, some steady, some shaking. By 20,000 feet, ice formed on my canopy. The sky looked empty, too empty. Then it appeared, a formation of P-47s positioned above us, sun behind them. They dove as one like a pack of wolves. Our flight leader shouted for a defensive split. We broke right and left, but the Americans had already chosen their prey. .2 cannons blazed beside me. My friend, Keller, tried to turn inside the Thunderbolt chasing him, but it didn't matter. One burst and his right wing tore apart. Flames trailed behind him as he spiraled downward. I remember shouting his name. No answer, only static. The Thunderbolt that killed him passed right in front of me. I squeezed the trigger. Tracers slashed the air. Some hit the cockpit, others the wing. He should have fallen. But the jug refused to die. He rolled once and dived straight down, still flying, smoke trailing but alive. American armor was a shield we couldn't crack fast enough. Their bullets could slice through our planes. Ours could bounce off theirs. How do you fight a machine that survives what kills you? My oxygen mask stank of sweat as I banked hard, engine screaming. A bomber formation loomed ahead, massive and terrifying. Flying fortresses. Their guns pointed out like thorns on a steel beast. We didn't even reach them. More fighters came from above. Mustangs this time. Faster, sleeker, deadlier. The sky had turned fully against us. We limped home. What remained of us, .9 of us had taken off, .4 returned. And when we landed, we didn't cheer survival. We stared at the empty spaces on the runway where our comrades should have been. Every day, the war in the air became less about victory and more about delay by time. Defend ground we could no longer hold. Fight for skies already lost. That night, I cleaned my pistol longer than needed. Not because I planned to use it, but because I needed to calm my shaking hands. I was 19 years old, and I felt like an old, tired man. The hunters were gone. We were prey now. But the darkest moments were still ahead. Spring 1944. We no longer fought for supremacy. We fought to survive another hour. Fuel was scarce. Planes were patched together with pieces from wrecks. Every morning, fewer aircraft stood ready. Every evening, fewer pilots returned. Our briefings became funerals with maps. One morning, our commander looked at us with eyes that had forgotten what hope felt like. Orders had arrived. American bombers were again heading for Germany. We were to intercept them near Kassel. We launched into gray skies. The air smelled like rain and oil. Everything felt heavier than usual. Even the clouds looked tired. At 23,000 feet we saw them. A black line of B-17s and B-24s, stretching across the horizon like a giant wall of metal and thunder. Flak bursts bloomed around them, but the bombers remained steady, like they were bored of being attacked. We climbed toward them, hearts pounding. Then came the escorts. Thunderbolts and Mustangs dropped toward us from above. Every single time. They owned the sun. They owned altitude. They owned the sky. A P-47 came at me head-on. At first, I thought he was just another pilot like me, but the way he moved, calm, deliberate, unstoppable. He felt like something sent to erase me from the world. We fired at the same time, but I saw his tracers streak past. My own shells flashed across his nose and wing. For a heartbeat, I thought I had hit him. Then he rolled under me and came up behind like a phantom. .8.50 caliber guns. .8 streams of fire. They don't shoot. They tear the air apart. My tail shook under the impact. A warning light blinked red. I could smell fuel. Flames licked along the fuselage. Heat pressed against my back like the breath of death. I shouted into the radio for help. No answer. Only panicked voices and screams. Someone yelled they were hit. Another cursed as his engine exploded. One cried for his mother before the radio went quiet. I tried to dive. Push the nose down. escape at full throttle, but the Thunderbolt followed, always behind me, always faster. Then he pulled alongside, just a few meters away. For a moment, time stopped that I could see the pilot's helmet. The calm in his posture, he didn't look like a monster, he was just a man. Doing his job, that he looked at my burning aircraft, and he moved his hand, not to fire, but to wave me away. He was telling me, live, that I had never seen such a thing, mercy. In the middle of hell, that I yanked the canopy handle. Wind roared through the cockpit as fire spread. I whispered a goodbye to my plane, to my youth, to my illusions. I jumped. Falling through the sky feels like dying in silence. The world becomes distant, quiet. The war looks small from above. My parachute opened with a violent snap. The flames grew tiny below as my aircraft spiraled to earth. A black wound in the sky. I drifted slowly toward the fields of Germany. Farmers stared up at me, pointing, maybe praying. My hands shook uncontrollably. Not from fear, from survival. An hour later, I stood on solid ground again. But I didn't feel alive. We had been the Luftwaffe. Proud, fearless, elite. Now we were scattered pieces of a broken dream. The sky we once ruled belonged to someone else. And deep inside, I knew something had ended that day. My friends. My belief in victory. My sense that we were invincible. War had taught us a cruel lesson. The more you laugh at an enemy, the harder it is to face them once they stop being funny. But that was not the end. It was only the beginning of the final collapse. Summer 1944. I returned to my airfield as a survivor. But survival no longer felt like victory. Our squadron, once 38 aircraft and more than 40 pilots, had become 9 planes and 11 men. The empty bunks were covered in dust. Sometimes at night, the beds of the dead looked like ghosts still slept in them. We stopped painting victory marks. There were no victories left to mark. Every mission briefing sounded like a farewell. The commanders talked about slowing the enemy advance. But we all heard the truth. We were being sacrificed. Fuel shortages were devastating. We often had only enough for one climb and one attack. Not enough to return. Every sortie could be our last. Statistically, mathematically, inevitably. Germany was collapsing. Factories burned under American bombs. The smoke never left the sky. Cities became ruins where people searched for food like wounded animals. We were told our duty was to protect them. But how can you protect anyone when you can no longer protect yourself? August 1944, France was lost. September, Romania turned against us. October, the Soviets reached East Prussia. Every map update looked like blood spreading across the land. Our aircraft were outdated against swarms of Thunderbolts and Mustangs. Flying felt like walking into gunfire willingly. Many pilots refused sleep. In dreams, we heard engines screaming and flames roaring. Then came the day everything ended. November 5th, 1944, we were scrambled to defend a rail station near Ham. My Bf-109 struggled to climb. The engine coughed black smoke. Still, I pushed it because turning back meant a court-martial. And honestly, I no longer feared death. At 18,000 feet we saw them. Not bombers this time, Thunderbolts. Only Thunderbolts. They were hunting us. I banked right, tried to dive. But they were already on top of us. One by one, our aircraft burst into fireballs against the gray winter sky. In less than 2 minutes, I was alone. Then I heard it. A sound like steel ripping through the air. The roar of the P-47 engine behind me. I turned my head and saw him again. Maybe the same pilot. Maybe another angel of death wearing the same wings. A burst hit my left wing. My aircraft shook violently. Smoke filled the cockpit. Flames reached my feet. I had a choice. Burn or jump. I chose the sky again. The cold wind hit me like knives. The world spun. My parachute deployed. Below, I could see the burning remains of our base. Of my home. I floated down into silence. But silence in war is terrifying. Silence means something has ended. Sometimes it means you have ended. I landed in a small forest. Pain shot through my leg. I had broken something. I dragged myself under a tree, breathing smoke and fear. Minutes later, I heard voices. Not German. American. Boots on leaves. The click of safety catches. A flashlight beam found my face. One soldier shouted, raising his weapon. But another stepped forward and pushed the barrel down. He saw my injury. He saw I was just a boy trying not to die. He said only one word, medic. No hate, no anger, just a calm decision to save a life that hours earlier, he was trained to destroy. As they carried me away, I looked at the night sky. For the first time since this war began, I didn't fear it, because the sky no longer belonged to me or to Germany. It belonged to the victors, and I was nothing more than a prisoner of their mercy. And I thought that was the end of my war. But life in captivity would test my humanity in ways I never imagined. And hope would be the final battlefield. The war did not end when I surrendered to gravity. It simply changed uniforms. I woke up in a barn that smelled of hay and blood. My right leg was wrapped in white bandages that were already turning red. A young American medic sat beside me, eating a chocolate bar. When he noticed I was conscious, he broke it in half and handed me a piece. Sweetness filled my mouth. I almost cried. He asked my name. I answered with a whisper. He nodded gently, as if confirming I was human. That was the first time in years someone looked at me without seeing an enemy. 2 days later, I was transported to a POW camp near the Belgian border. I expected cruelty, beatings, hunger, execution. Instead, I was given a bed. A real bed. They fed us soup, bread, even coffee. Coffee felt like a luxury meant for another life. We were guarded carefully, but treated fairly. One American soldier even offered me a cigarette each night, a ritual that made me feel like the world had not completely lost its mind. But captivity has its own weapons, silence, reflection, time. Too much time to die in the camp. Rumors were our news. Germany was collapsing on every front. The Soviets entered Warsaw. The Allies crossed into Germany. Munich bombed, Dresden burned. Each update broke another piece of the world I once believed in. We were no longer pilots and no longer soldiers. We were witnesses to our homeland's destruction from behind a fence. One evening, a guard pointed toward the sky. An American B-17 formation flew overhead, dozens of silver shapes cutting through the sunset like steel arrows. They did not fear anti-aircraft fire anymore. They did not fear us. We watched them in total silence. That silence was our surrender. Months passed. Spring 1945 arrived like a ghost of hope. Green grass grew around the trenches and towers. Birds returned, singing above barbed wire, as if war meant nothing to them. April 30th, 1945. We heard a guard yell it across the yard. Hitler is dead. Some prisoners cheered. Others collapsed into the dirt. I stood still. I felt nothing. Because when the world you trusted dies, grief comes slowly. May 8th, Germany surrendered. There was no final battle. No grand ending. Just a quiet announcement at roll call. The war is over. Some men laughed. Others shouted. Many cried. I walked back to my bunk and sat on the mattress. I stared at my hands. These hands once held control of a Messerschmitt. Now they were just hands. Hands of a boy who lived. Hands stained with the price of survival. We were released gradually, but I was afraid to leave. What awaited me beyond the fence? A ruined homeland. A family buried under bricks. Freedom felt heavier than captivity. When my name was finally called, An American guard shook my hand before I stepped out. Not the handshake of victory or defeat, but a handshake between two young men who had seen too much death. I walked away limping, carrying nothing but memories. The gates closed behind me and I was free. But freedom after war is not peace. Peace is something you must rebuild piece by fragile piece. Years later, I stood near a quiet airfield in Germany. Civilian planes flew overhead, slow, harmless, peaceful. That I looked up and felt the wind on my face. The sky was calm. For the first time since I was a boy, I was not afraid of it. That I sometimes think about the thunderbolt that chased me from the heavens, about the pilot who had mercy when he could have taken my life. Enemies in war, brothers in survival. War taught me this. Respect the man who fights you, mourn the man who falls, and forgive the man you once were. My war ended long ago. But the memories still fly, not like the proud hunters we once believed we were, but like ashes carried by the wind.